Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Histories Uncharted. I am Shanna, your host, and here today with me is my amazing co-host, Cecilia.
Hello, everyone.
We're super excited to welcome you back to another in our series of spooky Halloween episodes. Oh, I think it's our last one, isn't it?
It is our last one.
Yes, this episode is releasing on the Wednesday before Halloween this year, and it is going to be about witches, since we like to do spooky things.
Heck yeah. No, I'm super excited about this. I couldn't think of a better way to wrap up our spooky series other than witches.
Exactly. We've had vampires and spooky poems and ravens and all of the fun ways that we can hurt each other. And now we are here to discuss witches. And as always for these Halloween series, I feel like I've had to stop and take a moment to remind the listener that this episode is going to have graphic content, and if that is not your bag, then turn back now. I feel like all of our episodes just really need to have that added.
You know, I kind of agree. But this is adult
content.
Adult content.
Yeah, that's how I say it when I hand out our business cards, is I say this is definitely adult content. Or for a mature audience.
I agree.
Yeah. And we like to have fun here on Histories Uncharted, and we hope that you guys do too. And since you're here listening, you do enjoy fun, like we do.
Heck yeah.
Okay.
Not that history shouldn't be shared with the whole entire world. It's just our delivery is mature. There are drinks in the background.
If you haven't noticed, I'm sure some of you repeat listeners are aware.
We're just really good, historical storytelling, my friends.
Yeah. Here in America, we are all force-fed the crucible in our high school years. Over and over again, we hear about the Salem witch trials. And they're all right. A lot of things happen. It's cool. We get it.
Absolutely.
But we're all also aware of them.
We are.
As I was speaking to humans in my life about this witch episode, and they all immediately went to Salem witch trials, and I said, no, actually, I'm going to branch out and we're going to talk about different places in Europe. So most people, when I say I'm going to speak about the European witch hunts, they all pretty much say, I don't know anything about those. Some don't even know that they existed. So I am very excited to be able to expand everyone's knowledge and share some of these stories of our past so that we can take them and move forward. I always think that, you learn from your past and human behavior and stuff. And hopefully these are things that won't be repeated as we move forward as human beings.
So I would also categorize myself as one of those people. I know a lot about American history, especially when it comes to the Salem witch trials. But when it comes to outside of America, the Salem witch trials were influenced based upon the European witch trials that had taken place and were currently taking place.
Most definitely.
But beyond that, I really just don't have a whole lot of understanding. And really, a lot of what I have seen about Salem witch trials is definitely the Hollywood sensationalized versions of
the Crucible.
Over
and over again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Winona Ryder is forever burned in my brain.
Which is fine. I'm not upset about that at all either.
No, not at all. I think it's important to understand your own history, but I think it's very valuable to understand the history of other countries as well, especially in how they have influenced our own experience.
I love that. I love learning and sharing about other cultures and the world history as much as I can. And hopefully you do too.
Heck yeah.
So as far as witches, you're going to get a real quick hit it and quit it here, guys. Witches have existed since we've been humans. We've always had shamans, medicine men, used for wizardry, and the Egyptians and Babylonians. So people that have practiced in a spiritual way, a communication and using a form of magic and spirits has been around since we've communicated with each other.
Absolutely.
All right. So what we are speaking about today is the European witch hunts from 1450 to the 1700s. All right, we're going to take this little chock-a-block So, throughout history, the church and or the state has been involved with the superstition of witches, demon worship, all the way since antiquity. The use of dark arts to get personal gain has normally been associated with men since the dawn of time, and witchcraft was predominantly a male profession and activity. So, they knew that this was going on, and there are many instances where the church or the state has tried to control superstition and its dangerous side effects. As we all know, that superstition and persecution have dangerous side effects.
Very interesting. So, predominantly a male profession.
Okay, so, and it pains me to say this. This is because throughout all of history, women are of such a lower intellect that only men were capable and had the knowledge to practice demonology and read the books of spells and were wealthy enough and knowledgeable enough to be able to conduct and do this. So this was normally a wealthy male profession, and women were just too darn stupid and illiterate to figure it out.
Fair enough. Sounds historically accurate.
Now, that's not to say that there aren't numerous examples of women in history that have used spirits, magic, oracles of Delphi are normally female.
Yeah.
Alexander's mom did prophecies and magic and slept with snakes and all this stuff. Like, it exists, and women have done this, but predominantly. All right, big swaths here with our conversation. Okay.
That makes sense, yeah.
This is going to get a little crazy here. So in the early Christian times, they would hold these big councils and they would decide church laws and codes and other important business. So the church and state did try to control the superstitions and the persecution of witches. So in 1643, they have a code that states, "Let nobody presume to kill a foreign serving maid or female servant as a witch, for it is not possible, nor should be believed by Christian minds." So, I want to point these out as examples that not everybody thought burn a witch.
Okay.
Or that witches didn't exist. Some people thought that the superstition of witchcraft and witches was balderdash.
Right, that this doesn't even exist, so how can we accuse...
Right, it says
people of it.
It shouldn't even be believed by Christian minds. So these thoughts were out there. I just want everyone to see the other side of, as we talk about all of these persecutions and these crazy witch hunts, that there were people that thought logically.
Yeah.
Like in 785, they explicitly outlawed condemning people as witches and condemning to death anyone as a witch and to be burnt as a witch. So they tried to stop people from calling them witches and burning them, even as far back as the 700s. So they were even teaching that witchcraft did not exist and that to teach that in reality it itself was heretical. Okay, heretical. Heresy. That's going to come up a lot. Heresy means going against the word of the church or the religion of the time. So if the Catholic Church is in control, then the Protestantism is heresy. If the Protestant Church is in control, then Catholicism is heresy.
Right.
Speaking against the king is speaking against the God, because kings are ordained by God.
Right.
That is heresy. So basically, you can be accused of heresy
depending on who has the ball.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If the person in charge wanted to.
And we're talking Protestants and Catholics during this specific chunk of time?
Yes. This is when we're talking 1450 to 1700. This is when we're locking in this particular podcast episode. I'm just going to try to get a little bit of backstory for everyone, kind of how it set the stage for these witch hunts to even happen, because everyone just looks at me and says, how do these even happen? People just going crazy and accusing each other and then just killing and torturing. And that's what it may seem like, but This is a perfect storm of religious upheaval, religious controversy, and political controversy.
Absolutely.
All right. So basically, before this time, crimes are solved on a very one-to-one basis. All right. A person makes an accusation, and then you would have to present evidence. And normally your evidence is your standing in society. So if you had a higher rank than the person accused, you have good evidence. Yay, you. But if you are trying to accuse a person of higher rank than you, you have poor evidence.
That's convenient.
Yeah. And then they would have to go through what is called a trial by ordeal, and fate or God or whatever determines your guilt or innocence. Okay? Trial by ordeal is super fun. A person would put their hand in boiling water or carry a hot iron for like 20 paces or 2 minutes or 30 seconds, whatever you had to do. And then, if it healed in 3 days, they were innocent. But if this horrific third-degree burn on your extremity without any medications or first aid treatment was not miraculously healed within 3 days, you were guilty.
Okay.
Yeah. So, sometimes they would tie them up and dunk them in a river. If they drowned, they were innocent. If they lived, they were guilty. Because the water rejected them because of their stained souls. And if they drowned, then they got to die a good Christian death. And they were innocent, and that was awesome for them. So.
Also okay.
So those are trial by ordeals.
These are really setting the stage for how they then chose to deal with the witch trials.
Not even. This is how they dealt before it. This is how humans dealt with law and justice. It was a very one-on-one. So after this period, we move into gathering evidence, and at that point, judges are going to rely on confessions. That turns into evidence.
Okay.
But people don't really like to turn on themselves, and they don't like to tattle on themselves. So courts start using torture to get confessions. This actually begins to work really, really well because people will say anything you want them to say when tortured.
Yeah, it's really convenient, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so I know that was a lot, guys, but really the short summation is not everybody thought this way. This is a perfect storm of a lot of religious persecution. And before this, there were no judges and there were no trials and evidence and stuff. This is the first time in our human history when we're starting to do evidence and confessions, and then we're allowing torture to allow and create these confessions. And that all mixed together starts the European witch hunts. And unfortunately, that is where we start our story. After all of that.
After all of that information. All right.
But I'm going to throw in one more thing. Because while we're talking about this, we need to keep in the back of our minds that during this period of time, from around the 1300s to the 1850s, our world experienced what is called a little ice age. This means that at various times, locations would experience crop failures that often led to famines and then plagues, and this runs rampant along with other illnesses and issues. So this is a natural cause and effect hitting this period of our globe.
Okay, so historically, scientists are able to look back at this time and globally say this is the impact that legitimately, scientifically proven to have happened.
Yes, and like all of these plagues are documented, and all of these situations or famines and stuff are documented, and you can go back and you can see this very evident pattern of Europe experiencing bouts of plagues and famines and droughts and extreme weather and stuff like that that is impacting crops and food and income and humans' lives, causing the superstitions that are already in your small communities
Gotta be witches, guys.
to find a scapegoat.
Okay.
Who in your small little community, in your Christian community, are you going to find to be your scapegoat?
Right. The woman, the people who...
Okay, so religiously it goes both ways. If your country is Catholic and you happen to be a Protestant, the Protestants will be burned as witches.
Okay.
If your country happens to be Protestant, then the Catholics are burned as witches. Okay?
Good times.
Heresy!
Heresy.
Yeah, that's a big one. Treason and heresy. Once you're tagged with that, you are fucked. You're done. You get crocodile shears. You get blinding with vinegar.
Yeah.
You have a good time. All right, so that's really just setting the stage for that, okay? So now we're going to talk about what kind of people were accused. Because everyone's like, oh, women.
Right, absolutely. And then, like, from what you're explaining, depending on what religion you're on and who you have pissed off.
Yeah, that's very true. So I want to start off that lots of men were accused. All right, this was hunt and craze are typically the words associated with these times. These were often for political reasons. They were accused of using sorcery to advance their careers. Sometimes when hunts just got completely out of control, they tortured everyone and demanded for them to provide names of other witches. So when you are being under extreme torture, as you might remember from some of our previous episodes, you will say anything.
Absolutely. You hang me up on the strapato long enough. I'm willing. My friend, I'm willing.
Exactly. And it's not like they're finally confessing to crimes. They're just screaming out any name that comes to them. And who are these people? These are your neighbors. These are the people that you see every day when you're in shock and in pain.
Yeah.
Your mind is breaking. You just yell, the baker, the miller, I don't know, please stop. What is it going to take to make you stop?
Yeah.
And so any name will be thrown out there. And so some of these crazes got really, really high body counts, and men and women were accused indiscriminately. But just saying that female witches really did really account for 75% of the deaths. I mean, that is still a true fact.
Okay, that's interesting. I guess if you were accused of witchcraft, I'm assuming that it doesn't always mean death.
Most of the time I'm going to say there's not a lot of examples where they got off with reform, considering witchcraft isn't real. Well, I'm not saying that the Wiccan religion, things like that, do not exist. What I am saying is what these humans were accused of, their demonic possessions, their sexual encounters with Satan, turning into cats and eating babies' livers. This is flying on brooms. This is the stuff that didn't happen, that they were forced to confess to. That is not real.
That didn't really happen, but were these likely people who had pagan practices?
Oh, totally.
Heck yeah.
Totally.
Healers. Heck yeah. Worshippers of various deities, perhaps. But I think it was well known at that time that you never talked about that.
There are going to be a lot less pagans in the 1400s. I'm just going to throw that out there. But that doesn't mean that they're still not out there. Women were normally targeted because they thought that they were weaker, intellectually inferior. They were morally weaker, so they would give in to their lusts and desires and have sex with the devil more often because they're corruptible. So the jobs that they had, they were in positions to be easily blamed if things went wrong. Like cooks and healers and midwives. So like if the food went bad and they got food poisoning, it was very easy to blame the cook of poison or whatever. These people tend to gather herbs, they make potions and unguents, which might seem like magic to the uneducated. And it's the cook thing of why witches are associated with cauldrons.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. Up until the 18th century, the birthing process was completely done by women. So that left midwives very vulnerable to revenge accusations if the infant had died in birth, if the mom had died in birth, or maybe like shortly after. It was said that midwives were often chosen by the devil because he loved to feast upon the flesh of unbaptized babies and then turn their remains into magical ointments. As we all know, that's not true. It didn't happen. This poor woman, this Hungarian midwife, was accused of baptizing 2,000 babies in the devil's name. My question is, or I guess my comment is, she didn't even know 2,000 people. How did she know 2,000 babies?
Yeah, that blows my mind.
Your village probably has like 200 people total.
Historical propaganda right there.
Christian math.
I guess so. Yeah, obviously. Those Hungarians, they're just popping out those babies.
I know. How many children does the average woman have to have if this one woman baptized 2,000?
Yeah, I just find it very interesting. So to me, I guess contextually, like, are witches even like pagan people who have these, pagan practices? Or because they seem very removed from their own religion and that they're just supplanted into having deals with the devil in this.
They're Christians. They're not pagans at this point.
I know. As a people, they're all considered Christians.
I think they would consider themselves Christian. They would consider themselves, they're godly women, that I'm just the cook. I'm the cook, and I've been to church every Sunday my entire life. These are normal humans randomly accused because of their profession or their association with someone else that's being tortured.
I think that's something that we forget to look at because we have watched, the Crucible and these silly girls who start these rumors of witchcraft and that they are practicing witchcraft, that we do forget that so many of these people are just regular everyday Christian people living about their lives.
All of them.
Who may have happened to serve some bad lamb in their meat pie and took out a couple people, and now they're accused of witchcraft.
Oh man, I'm gonna say that at least 70% of the people that probably were imprisoned and executed were there because of their names being called out by other tortured people.
Right. Because
every tortured person has to give like a list of 10 names. After a while, they run out of names and just everyone is accused.
Yeah. That really hits home for me that you really have to pull yourself outside of, like, these are not actually people who are doing any of these things.
Correct. These things do not exist.
They don't even exist.
What they're being accused of. Right. And we're going to get into that, like we're going to talk about who accused them. We're going to talk later what they're accused of and just the absolute ridiculousness that they're accused of. It's not true. And yet they all burn for it.
That's insane.
And because of the use of torture, which is why I'm glad we talked about torture devices, you can really understand what this means when it says that they were tortured for 3 days.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
What would you say if you were tortured for 3 days? Anything. Yes, I did it. Just please make it stop.
Absolutely. That makes so much more sense to me. I haven't slept super well in a couple of days. I recognize it like at the end of that episode, man. I was just really fading out, man.
Here's another example of not all of these people that were executed were old women. In a town in 1627 and 1629, 160 people were executed as witches. 40 of them were children. Okay. Oftentimes, the children of the condemned were executed upon the conviction of their parents. This means that their parents would be convicted of witches, and they would take out their whole families and their kids as well.
Oh, God.
So the innocent victims in these witch crazes and witch hunts, it's just insane.
Well,
I mean, they're all technically they're all innocent victims.
Okay, that's messed up.
Who accuses them? As we've discussed, many of the accusers are providing names that they are tortured, and they will just yell out any name. Oftentimes, the accusers were kids, which is really surprising that the court would take the word of children that these things were happening. But honestly, you could be accused by anyone at any time.
Okay.
So here are the things that they were accused of. First, we discussed heresy, right? So this is going against the religion of the time. Technically, the definition of heresy is going against one of the 10 commandments, that you shall have no other God above me. So technically, they are signing a contract with the devil, therefore choosing a God other than whatever God is in charge at that time. Does that make sense?
Right. The Protestant or the Catholic God.
Yeah. By having sex with Satan, you are choosing a God above the God of the time, and that is technically what heresy is.
I like that it's so specific. You bone Satan, and you're good. That's interesting. Okay.
Witchcraft is the alleged use of supernatural powers of magic. Okay, so what was really messed up is that magic, in one form or another, has been around forever. It was not the use of magic that made people mad. It was the use of magic for a nefarious purpose.
Ooh.
Okay, so you can use magic if you're doing good, like curing my illness or helping deliver my child healthily and well.
Oh, yes.
But if you deliver my child poorly, you are using magic in a bad way.
Right. My cow's milk is spoiled.
Yeah.
I got that cow from you.
Okay, so the third thing that you were charged with, which was really big, and it's so funny how many people actually confess. I mean, it's not funny. This isn't funny. I apologize for that. But it is interesting how many people confess to this, and it's not it makes sense with the torture. But the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is a ritual held at night that women or men would go to. They succumb to the temptations of devils and demons, and they all have this crazy orgy. That's it.
Wild.
Yep. So most of the people that confessed to heresy, witchcraft, and or Sabbath, attending a Sabbath. Some mixtures of those. On top of the very specific, you poisoned the miller's wife. They would tag on the very specific circumstances, but these are the 3 leading charges.
That they would have to admit to these 3 things.
These are the crimes, yeah.
Under torture that they were admitting to.
Yep. And you couldn't be guilty or proven guilty until you confessed. They all knew you were guilty, but you had to confess. It's weird because you never go in there. Now we are innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
Then you are guilty until
proven innocent.
Guilty. No, you're never proven innocent. You don't get tortured into innocence.
No, you're just guilty.
You're just guilty. They said you did this, you're guilty. That's it. But eventually you had to endure various forms of torture and then give them a confession. Then you were allowed to be sentenced to death. This is typically by hanging and then burning. Sometimes you were beheaded and then burned, or most horrifically, you were just burned alive.
Just whatever, burned alive. Yeah, we all know how that experience goes, and it's
rough.
It is really, really rough.
Yeah, not a good way to go. So by this time, by 1484, the punishment of burning is pretty much the punishment reserved for those that committed heresy and treason. So they were burned because you turned the bodies to ashes, and therefore they don't have a Christian burial, and their bodies cannot be resurrected on Judgment Day. So this is a twofer,
dude.
double screw to a perfectly loyal Christian human that got to endure horrific tortures before being executed publicly
in front of their community members.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's gotta hurt.
So,
I hope in their heart of hearts that they knew that they would be accepted into wherever they were going in the afterlife. That's really rough.
It is. Sometimes they were allowed to write letters to their loved ones before their execution, and we have a couple of those today.
Oh, I'm gonna cry.
Or excerpts from them. And I know that we're always laughing and giggling, but the purpose of these episodes is to share the knowledge and share the things that we have done. So, again, that we learn from our past and we don't do these things again. But we try to do it in a fun way that's not a boring person lecturing.
Absolutely. I mean, the content is interesting to understand. It does have a really sad undertone to it.
Definitely.
I think the saying goes, like, we didn't burn witches, we burnt women, and men and children.
We just burn people. Yeah.
Just people.
Yeah, and it's good for us to honor them by telling their stories and making sure that they didn't die in vain and that no one knows what they had to endure, that they are still shared.
I agree. Honored and shared.
Yeah.
So I know that this happened all over the world, but where are we visiting today?
Today we're going to Germany.
Ooh.
We're going to start our journey in Germany.
Okay.
Now, this is not to say that other European witch hunts don't fascinate the crap out of me, and we will circle back and address them in future episodes. Very excited about that.
Absolutely. I think going regionally sounds really exciting because there are so many different stories to tell.
All right, everybody. So we're going to lay some groundwork here.
I'm excited about groundwork.
For mayhem and murder. 1484. This dude, he's a Dominican inquisitor, Heinrich Kramer.
Okay.
All right. So he goes to the Pope and he demands that he should be able to conduct witch hunts in Germany. He has tried, but the local authorities did not feel that he had jurisdiction and sent him packing. He thought there were tons of evil women there and the local authorities would not let him play indiscriminately. Well, Pope Innocent VIII said, that won't do. And he issued a papal bull. All right, this is just an official letter. It's an order. He issued an order.
Right.
Saying that Kramer is authorized the correcting, imprisoning, punishing, and chastising of devil worshippers who have slain infants among other crimes.
What? So he was like, I'm gonna drop this gossip bomb on Pope Innocent VIII, and he was like,
Yeah, so he's like, I think there's a bunch of dirty witches in Germany, and they wouldn't let me just go prosecute them and persecute them. And the Pope went, well, that's stupid. Here's an order that says you can.
You good, sir. Go ahead.
So what this order essentially does, it lets them treat witchcraft as heresy. Okay. Anyone can say heresy, remember? This forced the local church to give them support. They were threatened that if they didn't give support, they would be excommunicated or brought up on witchcraft charges themselves. So if you tried to stop them or stand in their way, you would be legally persecuted as well.
Okay. That the church can now get involved in these civil disputes.
This dude, Kramer.
Kramer has the backing of the church.
Yeah, there you go.
Involved in these disputes.
And local secular non-church authorities have to give him the support because the Pope said so.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
So basically, witches are responsible for all of the bad things that happen in life, and we should get rid of them. So, Kramer goes around Germany, and he begins preaching, because he's also this, what is he, a Dominican? Oh, it's Inquisitor, but he's like some friars. He's a something. So he goes around preaching that these evil people need to be found and punished. Austria, 1485. He's doing his preaching craziness thing. And then this one wealthy, influential woman, Helena Schuberin. We're going to go with that. So she spoke against him, and she actually questioned him. He described her as an aggressive, independent woman who was not afraid to speak her mind.
She sounds cool as heck, Helena.
Mm-hmm. She asserted that his interpretations were heretical. He was saying heresy. So anyone can say this,
She's
okay?
like, reverse Uno!
She stated that he only preached against witches and that said that it was absolutely preposterous. Okay, so this is silly because this is something that he's preaching, that he says you are able to identify a sorceress who had stolen milk by striking a pail of milk.
What?
And she said, that's preposterous.
Girl, because she has 2 cents to rub together. What the heck, Kramer?
That's how you find witches. She was also accused of, at some point, passing him in the street, spitting on him, and cursing him publicly. Fie on you, you bad monk! May the falling evil take you!
Oh!
She began to refuse to attend his sermons. This pissed him off, so what does he do? Dun dun dun! She's accused as a witch.
No way. Strange.
So, during the trial, 13 other people end up getting accused. Schuberin was further accused of using magic to murder this knight. She was accused of killing him. He died of an illness, but they used her as a scapegoat.
Duh.
So, during her trial, Kramer was super obsessive and he heavily focused on her sexuality and like all of the things that she did. And the bishop that was overseeing the trial said that he was presumed much that had not been proved. So in the end...
What? So he just stood up there and said a bunch of real naughty things about her that may or may not have been true.
Yeah, about her sexuality and accused her of killing people and using witchcraft. And in the end, the bishop stated that Kramer had an unhealthy obsession with Helena. Therefore, her and all of the other women were either freed or received mild sentences. Kramer was expelled from the city and dismissed as senile and crazy.
What? Way to go, local bishop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that guy.
So Kramer was some crazy guy. He was so pissed at this point. He goes home and he starts compiling all of his views on witchcraft and all of his thoughts on women and all of the ways that you can identify women, all of the ways that you can torture to get confessions out of women. And he turns this into the Malleus Maleficarium, also known as the Hammer of Witches.
Ooh.
So he even gets the church support by putting that Pope's order in his book, but 3 years later the church are like, no, we don't really support this. But this does not stop it from becoming the handbook for female persecution from then and is still used today.
Oh, heck yeah. No, this book is messed.
It is.
Super messed.
So it's basically an instructional book telling how to identify a witch and then the numerous ways to torture her and how to get her to confess, and then the official ways to execute the offensive women. This also led to just a stream of other instructional manuals that was released upon this huge superstitious population. Small villages, lots of personal opinions, superstition, and then what happened in 1440 is the invention of the printing press. So now we have all of these toxic thoughts easily reproduced and published and distributed across Europe. Spreading the word of hate.
Vibes. I'm really glad that this is where we started in Germany, because understanding this Kramer dude and that this dude is, he's German. He's from Germany. This was his experience. And that this is what produced the Hammer of Witches, because it touches everything else that you would talk about when it comes to witch hunts.
It does. There's all sorts of books that come out at this time, written by just misogynistic, insane, religious dudes. But fortunately, there are several books released around this time that actually speak out against the hunt. So I always want to remind readers that while we as a species have had our stumbling points, there were always those that did speak reason and tried.
Yeah.
To speak the good word. So one of them, I'm not even going to try to say this original name, but it is translated as On the Tricks of Demons. It is a book written by a doctor, published in 1563, and it states that witchcraft does not exist, and that those who claim to practice it are suffering from delusions, which need to be treated as mental illnesses rather than punished as witchcraft. It was influential in the abolishment of witchcraft trials in the Netherlands.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that was a really awesome contribution. Good job, Doctor.
I mean, but also slightly damaging to future generations of practicing pagans, I could imagine. But that's more relevant history than past history.
Are you saying that modern day pagans are being called that they have mental illness?
It has been, yeah.
Today? That's weird.
Yeah.
So your religion
Not
is...
today.
Like
but
100 years ago, maybe?
100 years ago or so.
If you were a pagan, you had a mental illness?
It was considered a mental illness. That lasted well into the, I would say, probably 1900s.
Wait, you know what? I'm an outspoken intellectual woman, and that's considered a mental illness at some point in history.
Vibes? For real, dude. The things that were considered mental illnesses are far-reaching. Menstruation, you know.
Oh my God, that's a sin and a mental illness.
Obviously.
Terrible. All right, so The Discovery of Witchcraft, which is a really good book published by this English dude in 1584. It was intended as an expose of early modern witchcraft. It contains a small section intended to show how the public was fooled by charlatans, and it is actually considered the first published material on illusionary or stage magic.
That I really, really do dig. That's very cool. I might want to go and flip through that. That sounds interesting.
Well, so the dude that wrote it, Reginald Scott, he stated that the prosecution of those accused of witchcraft was irrational and not Christian, and he held the Roman Church responsible. So the popular belief held that all copies were burned when this dude James I took the throne. We're going to talk about him in 1603. We're going to talk about him in a different episode because that is Scotland and England. So all of the copies of The Discovery of Witchcraft were supposedly burned in 1603.
It's a rich history. That's so sad.
So before the 1400s, it was really rare for anyone to be prosecuted for witchcraft, but the increasingly common prosecution of heresy paved the way for later criminal prosecutions. So by the 15th century, belief in witches is widely accepted in European societies. So previously, those that were convicted of witchcraft really got like fines and penalties, maybe a day in the stocks, right? But after the publication of The Hammer of Witches, their prosecution became more brutal, as witchcraft became widely accepted as a dangerous phenomenon. So the most severe prosecutions took place between like 1560 and 1630.
Because of the propaganda, literally just laying the groundwork for this is the reason that everything is bad in your life, my friends.
Yes. If you have a famine and you have poor crops, it's because these women, because someone in your village has made a pact with the devil. You must now find who in your village made that pact. This crop was destroyed by hail. Someone did this. You need to find out who it is. And then they just start throwing out names.
Right.
And arresting everyone.
And this was the small town village, like this was their community.
Right. Most of these are small villages, a community of a couple hundred. Some of these towns still only have 5,000, 10,000. This isn't Paris. These
Right.
are smaller communities. These people know each other well. So maybe old grudges come into play. Maybe rivalries and jealousies come into play.
It very well could be.
It
Yeah.
very well could. All right. So, one of the main witch hunts in Germany is in a place called Trier. This is an independent Catholic city. It is in present-day Germany, and this particular hunt went from 1581 to 1593.
Wow.
This led to the death of 368 people, possibly the largest mass execution of Europe in peacetime.
That's absolutely insane. And I mean, this has got to be like one of the larger towns, larger areas.
Yeah, I really should have gotten like a population of Trier, but another thing that you need to consider is like these cities that hold the trials and the courts that hold them, the accused are often brought in from the surrounding villages in the countryside. So the humans on trial might not be from Trier, it's just where they are tried. So that's why they're recorded in this courthouse and before these judges. So everyone's rounded up and brought to the city to be punished.
The larger populace
Right.
of all of these surrounding areas.
The
That
leading
makes a lot of sense.
authority in the region.
Cool.
Yeah. So, in 1581, all these German names, please forgive me, any German listeners, and maybe you can help me with pronunciation. Johann von Schonenberg, Schonenberg, I think that's better,
I like it.
was appointed Archbishop of Trier. So Schonenberg greatly admired the order of the Jesuits, in which he was wonderfully addicted. He built them a college, and then he wanted to demonstrate his convictions, so he ordered the purging of 3 groups in his city. First, he rooted out all of the Protestants, then the Jews, and then the witches. These are stereotypes of nonconformity. Okay, anyone that stuck out that was not Catholic and followed the rules was then persecuted under one of these 3 titles.
Okay. Under one of those, okay.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
So between 1587 and 1593, 368 people were burned alive for sorcery in about 22 different villages. In 1588, 2 villages were left with only 1 female inhabitant in each. So, like, I want to do the math and give percentages because, like I said, it's like if you have a population of 200 and you kill 8 women, like, that's, you kill 20 people. It's a high percentage of these populations, but I'm just terrible at math. But it's hard to express to modern day numbers because we range numbers in the millions today and billions for our population. So 368, isn't that influential to us, but it was a huge portion of the population at the time.
I mean, if some of the villages, 2 of them were left with only 1 female inhabitant, I mean, that could have probably ranged anywhere from like 25 to 75%. The 368.
Right?
It would have to be a very large number that they just went absolutely insane.
And it just was rampant, the accusations and the ways that it would rush through a community. Meanwhile, notaries, copyists, and innkeepers grew rich. The executioner rode a horse like a noble of the court. and was often clad in gold and silver. His wife was adorned in silk and jewels.
See, I told you that executioner job had to pay real well.
This is the time that you wanted to be the executioner and the torturers. The children of those convicted and punished were sent into exile. Their goods were confiscated. Plowman and vintner failed. Hence their fields became sterile. A dire pestilence or a more ruthless invader could hardly have ravaged the territory more than this inquisition and persecution without bonds. This persecution lasted for several years, and some of those who presided over the administration of justice gloried in the multitude of the stakes which had once held a human being consumed by flames.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So one of the victims, this dude Dietrich Flade, sorry. He was the rector of the university and a chief judge of the court. He stood up in opposition to the persecutions. He doubted the use of torture and treated the accused very mildly instead of cruelly. Consequently, he was arrested, tortured, strangled, and burned, which made the witch trials even worse as it effectively put a stop to all opposition to the prosecutions.
For reals.
So anyone that spoke up against it was immediately removed.
Obviously, they were a witch as well. Duh.
Why else would you go easy on the witch?
Or speak up against what
For
was
real.
happening to them.
They were accused of being a witch. Why would you say that they weren't? Unless you were also a witch.
Dun, dun, dun.
See, that's the problem, is the state can call you a witch, they can kill you, and then they can take your property. So the state is just making bank. But you know what's really funny in all this research? There's some research out there that tracks the costs of each of the executions, because they did too. They were like, so many dollars went to the dude that provided the barrels of oil. So many dollars went to the dude that provided the wood that was burned. So many dollars went to the dude that tortured her. So they had these tallying and accounts of how much each execution was costing. And that was one of the main contributors in the 1700s to the end of the witch trials, or in particular villages, is they would confiscate all of the wealth of all of the people around. And then they ran out of money to take, and they were running out of money. They burned through all their money, killing all the people. And then they had to stop the trials.
I absolutely love that information was provided to you, because you are that person who's sitting there at the movie theater, like watching like the mass destruction, going like, who's paying for that?
I am.
How much did that cost? What do you think the insurance policy is on even this?
I had issues with Marvel movies in the beginning, and she would just get so mad at me.
Oh my God.
I'd be like, who is paying for that? That is probably their only means of transportation, and how are they going to get to work now? None of this is considered into any of this, and how are they the hero?
Absolutely.
So, yes, I did look at exactly how much it cost in wood to burn, and was this a cost-effective endeavor for the state? And as it turned out, no, it wasn't.
No. Turns out decimating your population by torturing and burning them all.
You run out of money.
Really,
yeah.
It's not a financially wise decision for anyone except for the executioner, who gets to ride around on his horse with his lady in silk and jewels.
Pretty soon it's going to get to the point where the executioner is the only one with any money to take. And then who's going to kill him?
For reals. So was it really the church and the state at this point, or was it the executioners? Curious. Anyways, that was just one city.
That was just Trier.
Okay.
So don't worry, we have others. Where am I? Let me go back to my notes. Next we're going to talk about the witch trials of Fulda, 1603 to 1606. 3 years. That's it. Took 3 years. That killed 250 people.
Well, they were a lot more motivated.
Yeah, they were. So there's this chick, Murga. We're just going to call her Murga. We're just going to first names sometimes. So she was born in the city of Fulda. She was married 3 times and was the heiress of her first 2 husbands. So this plays a later part in her accusations.
Okay.
So in 1588, she married Blasius. And in June 19th of 1603, Murga was arrested and put in jail.
Okay.
Her husband protested before the court and pointed out that she was very, very pregnant. In jail, she was forced to confess to the murder of her second husband and the children that she had with him. She was forced to confess that she had taken part in the Sabbath with Satan. Her pregnancy was considered an aggravating circumstance, as she and her husband had had no children, although they had been married for 14 years. She was forced to confess that her current pregnancy was the result of intercourse with the devil. She was then convicted of witchcraft and burnt alive on the stake, pregnant.
That is so messed up.
Yeah.
So, like, not only did this horrific thing happen to her, but they made her confess to the death of her other children?
Right. So
and husband?
Previous husband and any children that she had with him, and that this poor child that she was pregnant with was the devil's.
Oh my gosh.
What would you confess to?
I mean, honestly, I think I would
I
confess
say that
to
a lot.
anything. I would confess to everything.
Yeah.
I would.
I would too.
Just make it stop. I mean, like tattoos and stuff, like I've been able to do that, but like...
Because it's
like
a choice.
Said, stubbing your toe is another story, okay?
Oh, all right. 1625 to 1631. We're now in Würzburg. These trials resulted in the execution of hundreds of people of all ages, sexes, and classes, all of whom were burned at the stake, sometimes being beheaded, most of the time alive. 157 women, children, and men were confirmed to be executed. In the city proper, 219 were supposed to be executed from around the city, and 900 were estimated to be executed or to have just died in custody, okay, in the surrounding countryside.
Oh my gosh. So this is, I'm assuming, like, large population.
Or still not a large population, just a large chunk of geography that had a few villages that had a couple hundred each. So I guess totaling up there would be, but still a group of small populations. These witch trials took place during the 30 Years' War, which was between the Protestants and the Catholics. Mm-hmm. This was just a very, very bloody time between 2 people that believed in the same God. It's just insane to me.
But how you believed in him was... It's all about the details. And if you... Wow. Okay.
So the exact cause of the witch trials is not exactly clear due to incomplete documentation, but there was a frost that destroyed the grape harvest, and upon rumors that the frost had been caused by sorcery, some suspects were arrested and confessed under torture that they had caused the frost used by magic. So this territory was right on a border of a Catholic and Protestant area, so there was both groups of people around there. And so the Prince Bishop of this area really wanted to create this godly state in accordance with the ideals of the Counter-Reformation. So I believe that makes him Catholic. And he wants to make the entire population obedient and devout and Catholic. And then when witchcraft was rumored to exist in the city, he ordered the investigation. He implemented the Witch Commission and used torture without any of the restrictions that are regulated in this constitution that had been established. So this was in order to force the accused to confess to their own guilt and then name accomplices, and then they could talk about like performing magic or attending the witch's Sabbath. Poor people.
That's messed up.
So the first arrests are your more typical people that would be suspected, your poor working class women. But as the trials just grew with this snowball strength,
Right.
more and more men and children and all classes were accused. And then in the later years, sometimes the men were the majority of those being executed.
Well, because they'd run through all the women.
Yeah, and then they started moving into different areas. So, like, 43 priests were executed, as well as the nephew of this dude. At least 49 children under the age of 12 were confirmed to have been executed. Many of them were from the local orphanage.
Oh my gosh. Like, it just sounds like insanity. I'm definitely of the mind that, like, if you believe that this is actually happening, you are insane.
I agree. I don't know, but they thought that they were in the right. They literally thought that they were removing dangerous people from their community.
Were they actually? Like, was
No.
this literally? No.
No, of course
But
not.
this is, I understand the fever of it all and the terror of it all as people.
It's astounding.
It's hard to see both sides.
There is no both sides. It is just... I mean, that's just why they did
Well,
it,
I mean,
but
the
it doesn't...
fear of people that are willing to then go along with this because of what they are being told.
I don't know. I think they just went along with it because if you didn't, they'd kill you too.
Yeah. And that is terrifying. And that's a different form of torture, you know?
So during his reign of 8 years, he burned 900 persons, including his own nephew, 19 Catholic priests, and children of 7 who were said to have had intercourse with demons.
That's perverse.
So the capital city, Bonn, the chancellor and his wife, and the archbishop's wife were all executed. So even very high class, upper ranking people. Children of 3 and 4 years were accused of having devils for their paramours, like the cats or whatever.
Familiars.
Thank you. That's the word. And students and small boys of noble birth were sent to the bonfire. Okay, so this witch trials actually, there's a list available of victims. However, it's not really that representative because it only covers from February of 1629 up until February of 1629, and the craze lasted until 1631.
Right.
So there's like, 2 years? That's not even counted. Okay. This list accounts for 157 people. 73 men, 84 women, 30 children, 1 infant. How
That's
can an
messed up.
infant be a witch?
The mother, I don't know.
I don't
like,
know.
aren't
Okay.
we all born innocent?
Unbaptized baby.
Are they not? I guess I don't really know a whole lot about the baptizing of, like, what that actually...
Yeah, unbaptized babies go to purgatory.
Unbaptized babies go to
Yeah.
purgatory.
Yeah. Okay, so this list is super fun. It just had the most random names in the way they were listed. So the women almost never had names. Wife of Liebler, Old Anchor's widow, the wife of Gutbrot, 2 strange women.
That's us. Sorry. I'm sorry.
The old woman who kept the pothouse. Benzie's daughter. Benzie's wife herself. An old woman. A little girl of 9 or 10. A younger girl and her little sister. The mother of the 2 girls before mentioned. Liebler's daughter aged 24 years. The fat rope maker's wife. The wife of the apothecary and her daughter. A woman who played the harp and then hung herself. Brugler's wife. A cymbal player was burnt alive. The fat tailor's wife. The old wife of the court rope maker. And the fat noble lady.
I like how none of them are actually called witches. There are these women, girls,
These
ladies.
are the accused.
That's just insane to me.
Sometimes they were listed as just their jobs. So there's a minstrel, Lutz, a shopkeeper, the housekeeper of the dean, the knife grinder, and the bailiff was burnt alive. Sometimes it was just a really crappy description. I swear, this list was really, really fun to read, and I've edited a lot. I know that there's a lot on here, but I just had to share the more amusing ones. Like, this is just what they were listed as. They weren't, humans.
Mm-hmm.
The midwife. She was the origin of all the mischief. The woman cook of Mr. Mengerdorf. Bananch, a senator. The fattest citizen in Wurzburg.
What?
Steinecker, a very rich man.
Oh my goodness.
The children, man. The children was rough. A boy of 12, a boy of 10, 2 daughters of the steward of the Senate and his maid. A boy 11, 2 boys of 12, a girl of 15, a student who knew many languages. Goebbels' child, the most beautiful girl in Würzburg. 2 boys from the minister, each were 12. A strange girl of 12. The little son of Senator Stolzenberger. David Krolin's boy, the only one that has a first and a last name. His boy, 9 years old. The 2 sons of the Princess Cook. One was 14, the other was 10.
Oh my gosh.
2 boys in the hospital. The little daughter of Valkenberger was privately executed and burnt on her bier. The little son of the town council bailiff, probably the one who was burnt alive, and the infant daughter of Dr. Schultz, and a blind girl.
Wow. It was probably the infant daughter. The infant, that one infant.
Yeah. Why?
Insanity. That's why. Just insanity.
That's why it's called a craze.
Yeah,
because people just went temporarily insane. So the Bamberg trial, 1627 through 1632, over an extended period of about 1,000 people were executed after being accused of witchcraft. About 900 of them were executed between 1626 and 1632.
Wow.
People of all ages, sexes, and classes all were burned at the stake, sometimes being beheaded, sometimes alive. It's a popular thing.
That's insane. Over 1,000.
Yeah.
Around 1,000.
In a population that, I don't know, 20,000 maybe? I don't know what these, I would need to see what Bamberg's populations were.
Still, that's an extraordinary amount of people.
To be murdered for
a
made up reason.
For reals. I didn't realize it was so many people.
So many people. So we talk about the Salem witch trial. There are 11. All right? There are 11.
Yeah.
10 women, 1 man. He is pressed to death. The rest of the women are hung.
Yeah.
These are thousands and thousands of innocent men, women, and children and infants burned alive at the stake nothing.
In just Germany.
This is just Germany, folks.
Just Germany, folks.
We were going to do a couple different areas, and I looked at her and I said, girl, the research, I can't even tell you how many pages this is. It's going to be a 15 episode thing. So we ended up just breaking them down into singular regions.
Oh my goodness.
And I feel like just Germany could be a week by itself.
Yeah. And you should just start your drinking game right now for the amount of time she's going to say burned and beheaded.
That is true. If anyone wants to participate in the Histories Uncharted drinking game, take a drink every time a poor innocent victim is beheaded and burned.
You'll be well hydrated.
All right, folks. Poor Dorothea. It should be Dorothea?
It's just Dorothea.
You think? With the extra O in there? Miss Flock.
Miss Flock.
She was just 22 years old. She was the second wife of this dude. His first wife had already been executed for witchcraft in 1628. So, he's that's how prevalent it is in this area and the Bamberg trials.
Right? How many wives did we go through during this period?
I know, how sad. All right.
Sorry.
So, based on an anonymous accusation, Dorothea was arrested in December of 1629 and imprisoned for alleged adultery. So it wasn't even her husband saying this. It was an anonymous accusation.
Just some rando trip.
Right. Accused her of adultery.
That's messed up.
She escapes from custody, but is shortly arrested and caught again. This time, she's accused of witchcraft and arrested. She is also heavily pregnant. So, her husband flees to Protestant Nuremberg to the wives of his relative. Yeah, the relatives of his wife. So for weeks, they object to this procedure against Dorothea. They say that there's circumstantial evidence. It's insufficient. They cannot keep her imprisoned. They keep sending all of these complaints and letters to the court. So March 1630. So she's arrested. I mean, this is an insane amount of time for a poor pregnant woman. December of 1629. So in March of 1630, the husband finally obtains for his wife a mandate that says that she should be granted an ease of detention due to her childbirth. They receive no reply from the court. Right. So April 17th, he starts to threaten to appeal to the Pope. So finally, he gets a reply from the Bamberg court. They say that this is a legal arrest. She's already had her daughter, and she is transferred back to the main dungeon.
Okay.
All right, so his wife has now had a daughter. Where is his baby?
Right, but where's the babes?
Right. So May 11th, they finally get a mandate that is ordering her release. Okay, so it gets to Bamberg too late. They begin to torture poor Dorothea, and she ends up confessing to witchcraft. She is sentenced to death, and on the 14th of May, she is executed with, she is to be gripped with red-hot pincers and then burned alive. The remnants of her corpse will be burnt to powder and ashes because of her alleged misdeeds by witchcraft. The witch hunters learned of the imminent arrival of the order, and so they accelerated the execution and killed her an hour before the messenger arrived with the order for her release.
Oh my
God. So they knew that she was released.
And they still...
And they pushed it through.
That's just so heartbreaking.
I know.
Oh.
Well, sweet lady, if you thought that was heartbreaking.
Surprise, surprise.
Okay, so this is Johannes. He was the mayor of Bamberg. No one was safe.
Obviously.
No one was safe. So he's accused in April, leading up to his arrest in June of 1628. Okay. Johannes is implicated in the confession of other suspected witches. This means that his name was thrown out by someone else that was being tortured.
Right.
Okay. So court documents describe how at first he denies all charges. He demands to confront his witnesses and denies his involvement in any form of witchcraft, and he endures weeks of torture, which include the application of thumb screws, leg vices, and the strappado. He finally confesses on July 5th. So he's arrested
in
June 1628. I don't have the exact date. And July 5th. Finally, he claims that he is renouncing his God for the devil and that he had personally seen 27 of his colleagues at a Sabbath. He regularly attended witches' Sabbaths, to which he rode on the back of a monstrous flying black dog. At one Sabbath, he attended a black mass in which Beelzebub himself made an appearance. Although his fellow witches and familiars had condemned him to kill his children, he refused to do this, and he was beaten. He did admit that he sacrificed his horse instead. So he was sentenced and was publicly burned to death a month later.
That's really sad.
What's really sad is the rest of this is his letter to his daughter.
Is there
anything
all good. That's super poignant, though?
It's all tragic and poignant.
That first line, many 100,000 good nights. Dearly beloved daughter, Veronica. To know that he was never going to get to say goodnight.
He finished you off. Good night, for your father will never see you more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talks about what he confessed to, how he knows he was confessing it wrong. Like he knows he was lying. But he did it to make it stop.
Yeah. For all of this, I was forced to say through fear of the torture which was threatened beyond what I had already endured.
Mm-hmm.
For they never leave off with the torture till one confesses something.
They first stripped me, bound my hands behind me, and drew me up in torture. Then I had thought heaven and earth were at an end. 8 times they drew me up and let me fall again, so that I suffered terrible agony. God in heaven have mercy, the executioner, and put the thumbscrews on me, both hands bound together so that the blood ran out at the nails and everywhere, so that for 4 weeks I could not use my hands, as you can see from the writing.
Dear child, keep this letter secret so that people do not find it, else I shall be tortured more piteously, and the jailers will be beheaded. So strictly it is forbidden. Dear child, pay this man $1. I have taken several days to write this. My hands are both lame. I am in a sad plight. Good night, for your father Johannes Junis will never see you more. July 24th. 1628. That's just a couple of chunks out of that letter, and it's so incredibly sad and terrible.
And in the margin he added, Dear child, 6 have confessed against me, the Chancellor, his son, and others. It was all false. It was through compulsion, as they have all told me, and begged my forgiveness in God's name before they were also executed. They know nothing but good about me. They were forced to say it, just as I myself was forced to say it of others.
And that's what's really, really sad, you know?
Yeah.
So they've all still begging forgiveness.
I'm sorry I said this. I'm sorry I said your name. I had to.
That's insane.
This one's fun. So George Hahn. So he was a doctor and he was a member of the city council in Bamberg. So he was married to Katharina. They had 2 daughters, Katharina and Ursula, and 4 sons, Adam, Carl, Daniel, and Leonard. Hahn was among one of the most well-known secular people, and he publicly opposed the persecution of witches. Okay? So he sued the bishop against the persecution of witches, okay? And the court was supposed to be held in Speyer. So Hahn left for Speyer on December 27th to go to court. Right after he left, his wife was arrested for witchcraft.
Those bitches.
Yup. Let's see. Katharina was tortured until she confessed, and then she was burnt alive on the 16th of January. All right? So she was arrested probably at the end of December, beginning of January. She was burned alive on the 16th.
Right.
Shortly after, her daughter and namesake, the other Katharina, was swiftly arrested, tortured, sentenced, and burned.
What the cheese biscuits? Like,
George returns to Bamberg.
Okay.
He finds his wife and daughter had been arrested, condemned, and executed all in his absence, and that now he was no longer safe. So one of his friends tries to offer him a job to get him out of the city, but the messenger is prevented from entering the city. George is arrested. He's accused of sorcery. So his son is the one that denounced him. One of his sons.
What?
He was tortured. He confessed. He was executed on the 14th of July. In his will, he left his entire fortune to his children. But the following year, his remaining daughter Ursula and his son Adam were arrested and burned. He had 3 sons left, and they survived the trials and were given protection.
That is messed up.
Yeah.
But it was his son that gave him up.
Yeah.
Oh, but then he was later arrested. He was with Ursula.
Yeah.
Okay, that is super messed up.
I don't think you have much of a choice sometimes.
Well, it's just your family. I mean, that's what you get for being a doctor and a member.
City council. No one was safe.
City council.
No one was safe. All right, so the next examples that I have are just random examples throughout Germany. I did try to keep them at least to Germany. This one, her name is Sidonia. I thought this was really fun because she was a wealthy noble from a Pomeranian family. Pomerania used to be a country.
Okay. Did it really? That's like the best.
So she was a Pomeranian. I know, I love that.
I dig it.
It was an area which is now like Germany and Poland today.
Very nice.
But in 1548 in Pomerania.
Sorry, that's just stupid.
I know.
People would think that you weren't making it up if you didn't.
I know. That's
something.
why I put Pomer. I had to look it up on a map to find out where it would be today. But it is fun. Okay, Sidonia is this Pomeranian. In 1604, she was the age 52. All right?
Wow.
Yeah. So her parents had just died. So her parents were really old as well. But her parents lived to a nice, ripe old age. But then she died. So she went to go live in a convent, as all rich, unmarried women do. She then began suing her brothers for support payments, which they refused to pay. She then raised up through the ranks and became the sub-prioress, but also feuded with the prioress and was dismissed. She then launched into this huge campaign which led to chaos, mistrust, name-calling, and violence. As years passed, several different men were judging the situation, but they didn't get any results because they kept dying. It's a very plaguey time. So during a mass, so she's this very outspoken, rich woman. She's older, she's rich, she has a history of being outspoken.
Obviously a witch.
Okay. So she gets into this huge fight during mass and is finally accused of witchcraft. I'm surprised it took this long. And then this other poor random woman, which was standing next to her, right? This woman used to make money by telling fortunes. She had traveled with gypsies in her youth and was known to have several unstable sexual relationships. She was unmarried and had illegitimate children.
Very nice.
So the poor woman happened to be standing next to her, was caught as a backlash of her being an outspoken woman.
Oh man, Sidonia sounds like a hoot.
So Albrix, the poor woman standing next to her, was arrested on July 28, 1619. On August 18th, she was charged with maleficium and sexual relations with the devil. On September 2nd, torture was admitted as a legitimate means of interrogation. And on September 7th, she confessed to torture. She also accused Sidonia. She repeated these confessions in different trials. She was finally burned at the stake on October 9th. So she was arrested July 28th and murdered on October 9th. These are very, I don't know if you want to call them swift or slow, considering the dungeons and the tortures that you're enduring at the time. Sidonia, she had been imprisoned in the abbey because she was a prioress, right? Mm-hmm. She tried to escape but failed. Then she tried to commit suicide, and this failed. So they transferred her to a real prison on November 18th. And on June 28th, they decided to finally start using torture. What was her prison like from November to June?
That's half a year. What the heck, man?
So when it was applied on the July 28th, she confessed. The verdict of death was read. She was dragged to the execution site, and her body was ruptured 4 times with pliers.
What does that mean?
That is the pliers. That means
the witch's iron?
Yeah, but just not on their breasts. It was done on their arms and their legs. So you can take iron pinchers, heat them up over a fire, and then you just pinch. And it sears and melts and pulls.
Nice.
And they would, where was she? It doesn't say. Jesus. Sometimes it says her body was ruptured 4 times.
That's absolutely insane.
Arms, legs, stomach, back. She recanted her confession and she was tortured anew. And then finally, on September 1st, she was sentenced to death by beheading and subsequent burning of her body.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
16...
20.
1618? To 1620?
Let's see.
Or
Albrix was
1619.
arrested in 1619. July of 1619 to September 1620.
That's insane.
Yeah. So Walburga, probably with a Valpurga, I don't know. I'm sorry. She was an elderly widow.
Mm-hmm.
She worked as a licensed midwife for 19 years, and she was finally arrested and accused of sorcery. During her torture, she made a long series of confessions. She said, and I just always find their confessions fascinating.
I agree.
Because they're so outlandish.
It's wild.
It's wild what they are confessing to. So, in 1556, when she was newly made a widow, she made arrangements to meet a male co-worker for sex in her cottage later in the evening. But he did not arrive. Instead, it was a demon that had come dressed in his clothes. They had sex, and the night after he returned and promised to save her from poverty. She then confessed to having murdered 40 children during her work as a midwife before they were baptized. She did this by the method of applying a special salve or putting pressure on their foreheads, and then to having sucked their blood like a vampire.
What?
She confessed to having killed children and animals with oil and had eaten the children along with other witches, and then they used their hair for sorcery.
That's some outlandish, crazy stuff right there.
Yeah. So she was arrested, sentenced to death. All of her property was confiscated. She was taken through the city and stopped 5 times before they reached the place of execution. At the first stop, they tore her left breast and right arm with irons. The second stop, they tore her right breast. The third, they tore her left arm. The fourth stop, the left hand. On the place of execution, her right hand, the one with which she made her oath as a midwife, was cut off, after which she was burned alive at the stake. After she had been burned, her ashes were not allowed to remain on the ground, but were scooped up and dumped in the stream.
I mean, that's wicked cool. But the experience of it just sounds so vindictive. It sounds just so mean and friggin' nasty on purpose that she's like being paraded through the streets and this thing is happening to her. It brings up Circe walking through the town naked, stripped naked, and being humiliated in front of all of these people that she has dominated over for so long. Not that this is Valpurga's experience in her life, but going through that experience of being
the 5 different stops and
having your body parts ripped, the pain, just the absolute horror of it.
Yeah.
But then 19 years of midwifery and like giving your life to the celebration of life, and that this is
what they pay you in return.
And this is what you are being probably told to say.
Oh, yes, hands down. These were often guided tortures. Did you ride the black cat? Yes, fine, I rode the black cat. So most of these insane stories are actually the creation of the torturer and their fantasies and their obsessions, which I always thought was very interesting.
Yeah. Based off of Kramer's and others.
The inquisitional
really
instruction books.
Work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so sad.
I'm glad that you said like vindictive and stuff, because not all of these accusations are random. Mm-hmm. This is definitely used as a tactic.
Yeah.
As well as what happens with poor Katharina. She was a well-known and influential citizen, and she was married to Heinrich. Together with her brother, Hartger, she inherited a post office from their father and worked perhaps the first female postmaster in Germany. So that's pretty awesome. Go, Katharina.
Right?
But then they became in a conflict with the imperial court, who wanted to create a central post office, right?
Mm-hmm.
So from 1626 to 1631, a huge witch trial hit their city. And in 1627, a nun in the convent had become obsessed. Somehow, someone called out their names in a torture confession, whatever. And both her brother and Katharina were arrested in January of 1627. And both of them were accused of having caused several cases of death and sickness in the convent by using magic. So I'm not real sure how the post people attacked a convent, but that's what they were. She was imprisoned. She was denied bail. She was denied any protection. She refused to admit anything. And even after being severely injured and sick from torture, she was, in spite of this, found guilty and sentenced to be burned alive at the stake. So she was actually sentenced and executed after having never confessed.
Well,
They always seem like they at least would forced confession.
Yeah.
But she never confessed, and they did it anyway.
They're like, whatever, we know.
I think it's because they wanted to remove her and her brother from the post office gig so that they could implement a central post office.
I agree.
The conspiracies.
I think this was the case with a majority of the wealthy people. There had to be somebody who knew what they were doing.
Right.
You know.
Because you have to remember, they confiscated your property, they confiscated your wealth.
Yeah.
Accused you of whatever they wanted. And took whatever they wanted. All right. Poor Hester. She was 64. Okay, I just really want you to keep that in mind when you hear what she had to endure. Poor
Just
Hester.
A little old grandma.
Just a little old Hester. So she was charged with witchcraft, arrested, examined, tortured, and brought before the court. Among other charges, they accused her of having made a deal with the devil. So at first, she denied all of her charges. 4 weeks later, she was forced to sit on a chair spiked with sharp nails for almost 3 hours. After being tortured, she confessed to having committed fornication with a black man named Hans Beelzebub, and to having damaged humans and animals by using black magic. Hester managed to escape from captivity, but she was recaptured shortly after. So she took back her confession. She then was violently whipped the next day. She confessed again, and she was sentenced to death by beheading. So she was beheaded on December 24th, 1635, and her body was burnt and the ashes were blown away.
That's really messed up. This is like a little old, frail, 64-year-old lady. Stripped, examined, tortured, whipped.
Just, she keeps denying, and then they're like, here's this horrible torture, and then after 3 hours, she's like, okay, this is what happened.
Man.
This one's kind of sucks. Poor Anna. So there was a devastating fire on March 7th, 1751, and this triggered a witch trial. The fire destroyed most of the village, and this poor 63-year-old peasant was accused of causing arson through the devil's pact. She was judged guilty and sentenced to death. She was burned to death on April 24th, and after she was strangled. So this is just another example of a scapegoat.
Yeah, poor frickin' 63-year-old Anna, obviously, pacts with the devil, causing fires. It's lunacy. And not our last example, is it?
I have 3 more pages. These are just examples. These are just it's a blank page. 2 more pages. All right. Early 1628, Thomas Schreiber became known to be in huge opposition to the witch hunts going on, especially after the execution of the mayor's wife. He stated that she had been subjected to a great injustice and compared the execution to the bloodbaths of Nero.
Bold Thomas.
Big bold Thomas. 12 days later, he was pointed out for sorcery in the confession of somebody else. The interrogator stated that the... All right. He was pointed out for sorcery in the confession of somebody else. He refused to confess his guilt and called the entire legal process an injustice. He called the 34 executions that had been conducted since his arrest a bloodbath. During the following torture, he was finally confessing to adultery with Satan in the shape of a woman. He had stolen and desecrated the sacramental bread. He attended the witch's Sabbath, and since then he's unable to pronounce the rosary. He also listed the names of 7 different people that he had seen at the Sabbath as well. So Thomas wrote to his wife, and he reminded her that she often said to him, "Whoever is chosen for eternal life must undergo thistles, thorns, and strife." He said he wished for her to marry again on account of the children, for widows and orphans are despised and pushed down in this vile world. He assured her that he was innocent and that they would meet again in heaven. Thomas was decapitated and burned at the stake on May 30th, 1629.
That is absolutely insane. But it's one of many of the stories of people who are just like, yo, this is absolutely insane. Mm-hmm. What are we doing here?
This one's rough. Dorothy, she was 15 years old. Okay. She was one of the last people to be executed for witchcraft. Her case attracted much attention and was the subject of a lot of debate. All right. So she was employed as a maid. She then came forward and confessed, without needing to, that she had made a pact with the devil, that he visited her regularly for intercourse in the shape of a fly. The devil supposedly paid Dorothy for her favors, and the case against her was this alleged intercourse.
You mean she was probably the victim of rape?
Oh, that's an interesting theory. And her mind put it into the shape of a fly, and it must be the devil.
You never know. Like, that being that young and then being taken advantage of, like, this is all very horrifying, scary, scary stuff. Your brain copes in weird ways.
She confessed this under no one's making her do this. So she was then found guilty and executed by decapitation. So later the same year, they ordered an investigation to inquire whether the process had been correct. It was found that she was depressed and suicidal.
Interesting. So that she was like, this is a way for me to end it all.
Maybe. Yeah, like her tortured mind made the thing up, or maybe the tortured mind was protecting your interesting theory. I mean, who
knows? You never really know, but 15-year-old girl, and she is a maid. I mean, and she is confessing that these horrible things happened. Maybe she found herself pregnant. And out of despair. Golly, who knows?
Maybe she didn't confess at all. Maybe someone said she did and just beheaded her. You never know.
True. Those pesky maids, you never know.
I know. Just like poor Katharina Zimmerman. So she was Catholic. Her second husband, a butcher, he was a great merchant and soon threatened the competition of the neighboring butchers' shopkeepers. Okay? So her and her second husband are becoming competition and problematic. In addition, she was well acquainted with folk medicine, and she did not integrate very well with the Lutheran or Protestant inhabitants. Okay, so it's the Catholic and Protestants again. So the accusation of witchcraft went against the Catholics. She was brought before a court and after torture sentenced to be burned at the stake, only because she was a good butcher.
She was a very good butcher with folk medicine abilities.
And a Catholic.
A valuable asset to your community. That's
so if
really
she had
sad.
lived in one of the Catholic cities, she'd have been fine because they would have prosecuted the Protestants. But she lived in a Protestant city and they prosecuted her because she was a Catholic.
How dare you live in the wrong geographical location, Katharina.
All right, this one just sucks too. Poor Margaret. So she's super successful. She owns a middle-class business. She rents property to several tenants. She employs lots of servants. Mm-hmm. She's upstanding. Okay? So she has a dispute in front of her house. There's this beggar dude, Elsbeth Baird, and he's causing trouble in front of her house, and she sends him away. Get out of my yard. Stop being trouble in front of my house. So as revenge, Bayard accuses her of being a witch. When she attempts to clear her name, she files a slander suit. This is a completely legitimate response. But then it says she must be a witch, and it leads to her immediate trial and eventual execution. They include testimony from one of her servants who claims that Burgess had kissed her repeatedly on many occasions. Her. Repeatedly.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, on her trial, January 27th, 1629, she was strangled and burned.
Wow. Burgess was a very interesting lady.
Yeah. Here's another one, kind of revengey or motivated accusation. Mm-hmm. Poor Anna. So she was the mistress of Eric I, Duke of Brunswick. This is in Germany. She was a member of the landed gentry. She became the lover when he became a widower. This is perfectly legitimate. Unfortunately, he ends up getting married to somebody else. This is the Duchess of, Brunswick, Kallenberg, and Gothenburg.
Wow.
I'm sure I said that wrong. So Eric had to drop his mistress, of course, because he's married now. He even goes so far as to pretend that Anna is dead, and he holds a mock funeral for her, but really he sneaks her away.
What?
And then he starts to go back to her when his wife gets pregnant and has a kid, and then gets kind of sick after having a kid, and she can't really, be there for her husband.
Do her wifely duties.
Yeah.
You mean?
Yeah. So he goes back to Anna, who he's keeping, shacked up.
Right.
So,
his dead mistress.
Yeah, he brings her back to life. But then Anna gets pregnant.
What?
And the affair goes public, and oh my gosh, she's not really dead, and now Elizabeth is pissed. So, Elizabeth accuses Anna of having caused her illnesses and complications during her pregnancy. She accuses Anna of witchcraft, and she urges her husband to have Anna burned at the stake.
What? Ooh, she's bitter, mad. Yeah. This is a horrible act of revenge. I mean, Elizabeth, Anna also has a baby. That's messed up. Okay, carry on.
So Elizabeth sends spies and soldiers to arrest her, but she escapes. So some of her friends are arrested, like people that she knows, and these women are tortured and they die, and then they're burned at the stake. So Elizabeth never got to have her revenge on Anna because Eric helped her escape, and this caused Elizabeth to finally break it off with Eric, and they ended up getting a divorce. I mean, to accuse another woman of being a witch knowing what would happen, that's cold.
That was really messed up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she never got her man at the end.
She didn't get her man. She didn't get her revenge. Nope.
She got nothing.
She got nothing, and she left. Oh gosh, everyone, that was the very, very long, sad tale of all of the poor victims, not even all of them, it's a very small portion of the victims of the German witch hunts. Like we mentioned earlier, we're going to circle back as witch hunts and the witch craze is a very fascinating topic that impacted lots of different areas in Europe and America, and we're going to hopefully have some episodes in the future to have more conversations about it.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed the deep dive on the individual cases, the individual people. I think you're right. Like the things that they confessed to.
That's really what is super fascinating. Yeah.
It's wild. How this was used to take people out of position. It was used as a way to seek revenge on other people. That was crazy. But I think what scares me the most is that it was used to explain natural phenomena.
Yeah, the famines and the fires.
Yeah.
Those are terrifying because that's just, I mean, all of it's terrifying. All of it's terrifying. I think your just name being called out as someone screaming in pain.
Absolutely.
And then the next day they're in the cell next to you and you just feel so bad.
You're like, my guy, I'm sorry,
so
it was me.
Sorry.
That's insane.
And then you're both just brutally murdered. So hopefully, like, the point of history is to learn the stories of where we came from, and hopefully this will help determine where we are going. And hopefully we are going on a path of compassion and understanding and peace and love and unity. We're definitely not there now, so I hope we get there in our human future. And on that amazing note, thank you so much for enduring our tortured tales through the Halloween season, and we hope that you have a wonderful and safe All Hallows Eve.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
We just wanted to take a minute and thank you for listening to us here at Histories Uncharted. We know you have lots of options out there, and we are super grateful you chose to share this hour with us. As a brand new podcast, it takes a lot to get started in the beginning, so if you could please rate us, follow us, leave a comment, or even share our podcast with someone you think would love to hear a cool story. You can do one or all three, but whatever you do, we would love to hear from you.